Commander Zexai stood before the massive viewing screen aboard the Galactic Council's flagship, watching the blue-green world that had haunted their collective nightmares for the past 3 solar cycles. Earth hung in the void like a jewel, but something was wrong. Terribly wrong. Still nothing, Commander, reported Lieutenant Kraltek from his monitoring station. No radio transmissions, no quantum signatures, no hyperspace disturbances. It's been 47 days since the last human communication. The silence was deafening. For over 2 centuries, Earth had been a constant source of chatter across every known frequency. Human voices had filled the galaxy with their music, their stories, their endless debates about everything from politics to the proper way to prepare something called pizza. Now, nothing. This makes no sense, muttered Admiral Vorthgon, the hegemony's chief military strategist. His scaled hide rippled with anxiety patterns that he couldn't quite suppress. Humans don't just go quiet. They're incapable of it. My intelligence reports show they argue about the weather on their own planets. Ambassador Rilia of the Stellar Confederation nervously adjusted her crystalline breathing apparatus. Perhaps they've finally achieved the impossible and actually agreed on something? The suggestion drew uncomfortable laughter from the assembled alien dignitaries, but it died quickly. Everyone present had dealt with humans before. The idea of unanimous human agreement was more terrifying than reassuring. "Sir," called out sensor specialist Nexfor, his tentacles dancing frantically over his console. "I'm detecting some unusual energy readings from their home system. It's not anything in our databases, but the power signatures are substantial." Commander Zexai's mandibles clicked in annoyance. Everything about humans was substantial. Their cities sprawled across continents with the enthusiasm of aggressive fungi. Their industrial output had tripled every decade since first contact. Their population had somehow managed to stabilize at 12 billion without the usual wars of resource depletion that plagued most species. But it was their military that truly kept alien leaders awake at night. When the Galactic Council had first encountered humanity, the consensus was that they would be easy to integrate. A young species with primitive technology and a tendency toward internal conflict. Perfect candidates for the standard absorption protocol that had worked on thousands of other worlds. That assessment had lasted exactly 37 minutes into the first diplomatic meeting. "You want us to do what now?" had been humanity's response to the Council's generous offer of junior membership status. The human ambassador, a surprisingly small female named Sarah Chen, had listened politely to the standard terms: technology sharing, limited sovereignty, mandatory cultural adaptation guidelines, and the usual prohibition on maintaining independent military forces beyond system defense. "We appreciate the offer," Ambassador Chen had said with that unsettling human smile, "but we'll stick to observer status for now. We're not really the joining type." The Council representatives had exchanged glances. Observer status was typically offered to species that lacked faster-than-light travel. Humans had somehow developed 3 different FTL systems and were working on a 4th. "I don't think you understand," Counselor Thexmar had explained patiently. "Junior membership isn't really optional for species of your technological level. It's for galactic stability." "And I don't think you understand," Ambassador Chen had replied, her smile never wavering. "When humans say no, we mean no. We're funny that way." What followed was the most diplomatically catastrophic first contact in galactic history. Within 6 months, humanity had established trade relationships with 17 different species, military cooperation agreements with 8 others, and had somehow convinced the Rigelian Commerce Guild to establish a competing trade route that bypassed Council space entirely. But the real shock came when the Council decided to enforce compliance through the traditional method, a demonstration of overwhelming force. The task force sent to Earth's system was impressive even by Council standards. 200 ships, including several planet crackers and the pride of the Council fleet, the dreadnought Infinite Authority. The message was clear: submit or be reduced to radioactive dust. Humanity's response had been decidedly non-standard. Admiral Patricia Reyes had transmitted from the bridge of the Earth Defense Force flagship Defiant. "That's a lot of ships. Y'all sure about this?" The Council fleet commander had been somewhat taken aback by the casual tone, but had proceeded with the standard ultimatum speech about the futility of resistance and the inevitability of Council authority. Admiral Reyes had listened politely, then responded, "Well, that sounds real official and all, but see, here's the thing. You showed up in our house uninvited and started making demands. Where I come from, That's considered mighty rude behavior. The council commander had attempted to explain that this was simply how galactic civilization worked. Older, more advanced species provided guidance and structure to newer ones. It was for everyone's benefit. I reckon we'll just have to agree to disagree on that point, Admiral Reyes had replied. Now, I'm gonna ask you real polite like to turn those ships around and head on home. We can talk about this like civilized folks once you're back in your own space. The council commander had been genuinely confused. You do realize you're outnumbered 200 to 1? Yep. And that our firepower could sterilize your entire system? Aha. And you still refuse to surrender? That's about the size of it. What happened next had become required study material in every military academy across the galaxy. In 17 minutes, the Council task force went from overwhelming superiority to complete tactical disaster. Human ships appeared out of nowhere, moving in patterns that defied known physics. Their weapons were crude but devastatingly effective, and they employed tactics that violated every known principle of civilized warfare. More disturbing than their military capability was their apparent enjoyment of the entire affair. Council intercepted communications filled with human laughter, casual banter, and what their xenolinguists later identified as trash-talking. Unknown Contact 7, you might want to roll left about now, came one transmission. Why would you tell them that? Responded another human voice. Seemed like the sporting thing to do. Johnson, you realize we're supposed to be intimidating them, right? Well, sure, but there's no call to be rude about it. The Council fleet had retreated in what military historians would diplomatically term good order, though the reality was closer to panic-induced flight. Admiral Reyes had transmitted final words that still echoed through council halls. Y'all come back now when you're ready to talk like neighbors instead of landlords. That had been nearly 3 years ago. Since then, humanity had continued its inexorable expansion across the galaxy, establishing colonies, trade routes, and diplomatic relationships with a casual efficiency that left older species scrambling to keep up. They had somehow managed to avoid triggering a single interstellar war while simultaneously making everyone nervous about their ultimate intentions. Which made the current silence all the more ominous. Commander, reported Communications Officer Dalvex, I've tried reaching their embassy stations, their trade outposts, even their mining operations in the Outer Rim. Nothing. Every single human facility has gone completely dark. Admiral Vorthgon's scales displayed deeper patterns of concern. What about their military installations? Also silent. The monitoring station they established near our border, it's still there, but no one's responding to hails. Life signs? Present, but minimal. Like they're all sleeping or in some kind of stasis. Commander Zexhai studied the data streaming across his tactical display. Human space was vast, encompassing over 300 star systems and approximately 50 billion humans across dozens of worlds. For all of them to simultaneously cease communications was impossible by any rational standard. Unless it wasn't. Sir, sensor specialist Nexpor's voice carried a note of barely controlled alarm. I'm reading massive energy buildups throughout human space. Whatever they're doing, it's happening across their entire civilization simultaneously. Ambassador Rillia's crystalline features reflected the screen's glow as she processed the implications. A coordinated action across that much space would require communication and planning on an unprecedented scale. Or a level of technological advancement we haven't recognized, added Admiral Vorthgon grimly. The possibility hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Every species in the galaxy had made the same assumption about human technology, impressive but ultimately derivative of existing galactic science. Humans were clever, certainly, and had shown remarkable skill at improving and combining existing technologies, but they were newcomers. Baby species who had barely left their home system when the Council found them. Except humans had never quite acted like baby species. Commander, Communications Officer Dalvex's voice was tight with tension. I'm receiving a transmission from the Andromedian Collective. They're reporting the same phenomenon in their sector. All human operations have gone silent simultaneously. Similar reports began flooding in from across known space. The Regelian Commerce Guild, the Syrian Trade Federation, the Independent Worlds Alliance, every government and organization with human contact was experiencing the same unsettling quiet. This is coordinated, Admiral Vorthgon stated flatly. But, coordinated for what? Commander Zexhai had been studying human behavioral patterns for months, trying to understand the psychological drivers behind their seemingly contradictory nature. They were simultaneously peaceful traders and formidable warriors, casual diplomats and strategic masterminds, individual thinkers who somehow achieved remarkable collective action when circumstances demanded it. What if, he said slowly, they're not planning something new? What if they're responding to something we don't know about? The bridge fell silent as the implications sank in. Humans had shown an unsettling ability to gather and process information from sources that remained mysterious to galactic intelligence services. Their traders seemed to know about market fluctuations before they happened. Their diplomats anticipated political changes with uncanny accuracy. Their military appeared to have intelligence assets throughout the galaxy despite officially maintaining only defensive forces. Sir, Tactical Officer Mordek reported with obvious reluctance, our deep space monitors have detected movement in the void between. Something big is coming from intergalactic space. The void between was exactly what its name suggested, the empty space between galaxies where nothing should exist. Nothing had ever come from that direction except cosmic radiation and the occasional wandering asteroid. How big? Commander Zexhai asked, though part of him didn't want to know the answer. Preliminary scans suggest a construct approximately 50,000 kilometers in diameter, moving at significant sublight velocity toward our galaxy. Ambassador Rillia's breathing apparatus cycled rapidly. 50,000 kilometers? That's larger than most moons. It gets worse, Tactical Officer Mordek continued. It's not alone. We're detecting at least 12 similar objects maintaining formation. The mathematical reality hit the bridge like a physical blow. 12 objects, each the size of a small moon, approaching from intergalactic space with obvious technological signatures. Not asteroids. Not natural phenomena. Ships. Unknown civilization? Admiral Vorthgon asked hopefully. Unknown anything, Commander Zexhai replied grimly. But, I'm starting to think the humans might know more about this than they've shared. As if summoned by his words, the communication system crackled to life with an incoming transmission. The source designation showed it was coming from Earth, but the signal was unlike anything in their databases. Attention galactic governments and organizations, came a calm human voice that somehow carried the weight of absolute authority. This is Admiral Sarah Chen, Supreme Commander of the Terran Defense Initiative. We regret the communication silence, but circumstances have required our immediate and complete attention. Every being on the bridge stared at the communication console. The same Sarah Chun who had been a junior ambassador 3 years ago was now apparently commanding humanity's entire military response to an unknown threat. By now, your sensor networks have detected the incoming extragalactic fleet. We have been monitoring this threat for the past 18 months and have been preparing our response. The communication blackout was necessary to prevent interference with critical defensive preparations. Commander Zexhai felt his mandibles click involuntarily. 18 months. Humanity had known about this threat for 18 months and hadn't shared the information with anyone. We understand that our silence has caused concern among our galactic neighbors. However, the nature of this threat required absolute operational security during the preparation phase. We are now transitioning to active defensive posture, and limited communication will resume on priority channels only. The transmission paused, and, when Admiral Chen's voice returned, it carried a tone that made every alien on the bridge feel suddenly small and very far from home. We strongly advise all galactic civilizations to implement maximum defensive protocols immediately. What approaches is not a diplomatic mission. Retreat to your core systems and prepare for siege conditions. The Terran Defense Initiative will engage the hostile fleet at the galaxy's edge. We will hold the line. The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in stunned silence. The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened within hours of Admiral Chen's transmission. Representatives from every major civilization gathered via quantum link, their faces displaying various alien expressions of disbelief and growing panic. The massive chamber aboard Station Unity buzzed with nervous energy as dozens of species attempted to process the revelation that humanity had been preparing for an extragalactic invasion for over a year without telling anyone. This is completely unacceptable, declared Councillor Thexmar, his ceremonial robes quivering with indignation. How dare they withhold information of this magnitude? The security of the entire galaxy is at stake. Ambassador Krita of the Syrian Trade Federation gestured sharply with her forearms. More importantly, How did they detect this threat when our combined sensor networks found nothing until now? Their technology shouldn't be that advanced. Supreme Chancellor Vorthak leaned forward in his massive chair, designed to accommodate his boulder-like physique. Perhaps we've been making incorrect assumptions about human capabilities. The suggestion sent ripples of unease through the assembled delegates. For centuries, the Council had maintained galactic stability through a carefully balanced system of technological and military superiority. Older civilizations guided younger ones, sharing knowledge in controlled increments while maintaining clear hierarchies of power. Humanity had never quite fit that model. The real question, interrupted Director Melsan of the Andromedian Collective, is what exactly are they preparing? Their entire civilization has gone dark. 50 billion humans across hundreds of worlds, all coordinating simultaneously. That level of organization shouldn't be possible without our detection networks noticing the communication traffic. Dr. Yixnal, the Council's chief xenotechnologist, activated a holographic display showing recent sensor data. Our monitoring stations have recorded massive energy buildups throughout human space, but the signatures don't match any known technology. Power outputs are climbing exponentially, as if they're bringing some kind of industrial infrastructure online. Infrastructure for what? Demanded Admiral Kethran of the Hegemony Defense Force. Unknown. But the scale suggests they're preparing for something significantly beyond normal defensive measures. On the main display, tactical data streamed in from observation posts scattered across the galaxy. The incoming extragalactic fleet had resolved into clearer detail, revealing constructs that defied easy categorization. Each vessel was a masterwork of engineering that spoke of a civilization far older and more advanced than anything in their current galaxy. Preliminary analysis of the alien constructs suggests technology millennia beyond our current capabilities, reported Intelligence Director Korvax. Hull composition unknown. Propulsion method unknown. Weapons capabilities unknown. We're essentially blind regarding what we're facing. Counselor Thexmar's frustration was evident in every gesture. And, somehow the humans saw this coming 18 months ago? How is that possible? The question hung in the air like a challenge to everything the galactic powers thought they knew about their newest neighbors. Since first contact, human behavior had been a source of constant confusion for xenopsychologists. They seemed to operate on information and insights that came from sources no one could identify. There's something else, Director Melsan announced reluctantly. Our intelligence assets have reported unusual activity in human space over the past year. Industrial construction on a scale we didn't think was possible for their population. They've been building something. Supreme Chancellor Vorthak rumbled ominously. Building what? We don't know. But several of our trade partners reported human requests for massive quantities of rare minerals, exotic matter, and industrial materials. Orders that made no sense for their known technology base. Ambassador Krita's arms gestured in agitation. You mean they've been preparing for this while simultaneously trading with us as if nothing was happening? That level of deception requires coordination across their entire civilization. Or complete trust in their leadership, Dr. Yixnal observed quietly. The observation drew uncomfortable silence. Most galactic civilizations had achieved space travel only after centuries of internal conflict and the eventual establishment of authoritarian systems capable of enforcing unity. The idea of 50 billion individuals voluntarily coordinating for a secret project of unknown scope was almost incomprehensible. Sir, Communications Director Laxton interrupted, we're receiving priority transmissions from our border monitoring stations. The human vessels are moving. The main display shifted to show human space from multiple angles. What they saw defied immediate comprehension. Ships were emerging from every human system simultaneously. Not the few dozen vessels their intelligence estimates had suggested humanity possessed, but thousands. Tens of thousands. A fleet that spoke of industrial capacity and military planning that had been completely hidden from galactic observation. Where did they all come from? Ambassador Krita demanded. Unknown, Director Korvax replied grimly. Our best estimates suggested humanity possessed maybe 200 military vessels. We're currently tracking over 15,000 ships moving toward the galactic edge. But it wasn't just the number of ships that sent chills through the assembled delegates. It was their design. Human vessels had always been functional but unremarkable, clearly derived from existing galactic technology with minor improvements. The ships now visible on long-range scanners bore little resemblance to anything previously seen. The hull configurations are completely new, reported Dr. Yixanail, studying the incoming data. Material science beyond our current understanding. These aren't modifications of existing designs. They're entirely original constructs. Supreme Chancellor Vorthak studied the tactical display with growing unease. How long would it take to design and build a fleet of that size? Using known construction methods? Decades. Maybe centuries for a civilization of their size. And they did it in 18 months? Apparently. The implications were staggering. Either humanity had been far more advanced than anyone realized, or they had achieved technological breakthroughs that redefined what was possible in terms of rapid industrial development. There's more, Intelligence Director Korvax announced with obvious reluctance. Our deep space monitoring networks are detecting massive structures throughout human space. What we initially assumed were space stations are revealing themselves to be something else entirely. The display zoomed in on one of the mysterious constructs. What had appeared to be a standard orbital facility was clearly visible as something far more sophisticated. Geometric patterns that suggested purpose beyond simple manufacturing or habitation. Energy signatures that indicated technology operating on principles unknown to galactic science. They're everywhere, Director Korvax continued. Every major human system contains at least one, and some have dozens. We're looking at the most extensive construction project in recorded galactic history. Ambassador Krita's arms moved in patterns indicating extreme agitation. Construction project for what purpose? Based on energy readings and structural analysis, they appear to be weapons platforms. But the scale suggests capabilities far beyond anything in our databases. Counselor Thexmar stood abruptly. This is completely unacceptable. They've been militarizing on a scale that threatens the balance of power across the entire galaxy, and we knew nothing about it? Actually, Dr. Yixanail said quietly, reviewing the data with current knowledge, there were signs. Increased mining operations, unusual trade requests, subtle changes in their communication patterns. We simply didn't recognize what we were seeing. The admission sent uncomfortable ripples through the chamber. Every major intelligence service in the galaxy had been monitoring human activity for signs of exactly this kind of military buildup. Either they had all failed simultaneously, or humanity had achieved operational security on a scale that suggested capabilities far beyond what anyone had imagined. We need to establish contact immediately, Supreme Chancellor Vorthak declared. If they're preparing for this threat, we need to coordinate our response. Communications Director Laxton worked frantically at his console. I'm trying, sir, but they're only accepting communications on specific encrypted channels. Our normal diplomatic frequencies are being ignored. Then, use their encrypted channels. We don't have the keys. The simple statement revealed the depth of their situation. Despite decades of diplomatic and trade relationships, humanity had maintained communication security that even the galaxy's most advanced intelligence agencies couldn't crack. Sir, reported sensor specialist Dexbach, the alien fleet has altered course. They're no longer heading directly toward the galactic center. They're moving toward the outer rim, where the human forces are concentrating. The tactical display updated to show both fleets moving toward an inevitable confrontation in the empty space between galaxies. The scale was beyond anything in military history. Thousands of human vessels against 12 titanic alien constructs, each one capable of destroying entire fleets. This is insane, muttered Admiral Cathran. They can't possibly believe they can defeat something of that magnitude. Unless they know something we don't, Supreme Chancellor Vorthak replied grimly. Sir, Communications Director Laxton announced, incoming transmission from Admiral Chen. The main display activated to show the human commander, but something had changed. Gone was the diplomatic attire of their previous encounters. Admiral Chen now wore what was clearly military gear of unfamiliar design, and, behind her, the bridge of her vessel displayed technology that bore no resemblance to anything in galactic databases. Galactic Council, Admiral Chen's voice carried the weight of absolute command. Your monitoring networks have likely detected our fleet movements. We are proceeding to engage the extragalactic threat at maximum range from inhabited systems. Counselor Thexmar activated his transmitter. Admiral Chen, this threat affects the entire galaxy. We demand immediate coordination with Council forces. Respectfully, Counselor, your forces are not equipped for this engagement. We strongly advise all galactic civilizations to focus on defensive preparations for their core systems. Ambassador Krita gestured sharply. How dare you assume authority over galactic defense? We have military assets that are inadequate, Admiral Chen interrupted bluntly. We've been monitoring galactic military capabilities for 3 years. Your combined fleets lack the technology necessary to engage this threat effectively. The casual dismissal of the entire galactic military establishment sent shock waves through the chamber. Admiral Kethran activated his transmitter with barely controlled fury. You're a barely spacefaring species that we discovered less than 5 years ago. Your technology is derived from ours. Admiral Chen's expression didn't change, but something in her eyes suggested amusement. Admiral Kethran, with respect, your assessment of our capabilities appears to have been incomplete. Dr. Yixnal leaned forward. Admiral, our sensors indicate massive energy buildups throughout your space. What exactly have you been constructing? What was necessary, Admiral Chan replied simply. The approaching fleet represents a threat that requires unconventional responses. We've been preparing those responses. For 18 months, Supreme Chancellor Vorthak rumbled. 18 months of deception. 18 months of preparation. We would have preferred to coordinate with our galactic neighbors, but the nature of this threat required absolute operational security. The entities approaching have technological capabilities that include long-range surveillance and communication interception. Any premature revelation of our preparations could have compromised our ability to mount an effective defense. Intelligence Director Korvax activated his transmitter. What exactly do you know about this threat? Admiral Chin paused, and, for the first time, her confidence seemed to waver slightly. They call themselves the Devourers. Their civilization spans multiple galaxies, and they view inhabited worlds as resources to be harvested. They've done this before. Many times. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. Not a single extragalactic expedition, but representatives of a civilization that consumed entire galaxies. How do you know this? Dr. Yixnal asked quietly. Because, Admiral Chen replied, this isn't their first attempt at our galaxy. They tried once before, approximately 65 million years ago. They were unsuccessful. The mathematical impossibility of the statement struck every delegate simultaneously. 65 million years ago, none of their civilizations had existed. Most of their species had barely achieved sentience. That's impossible, Counselor Thex_Mar stated flatly. Nothing could survive that long or maintain that kind of institutional knowledge. Admiral Chen's smile was not reassuring. You're right, Counselor. Nothing organic could maintain that kind of institutional knowledge across such time spans. The implication hung in the chamber like a toxic cloud. Something non-organic. Something artificial. Something that had been watching and waiting for 65 million years. Deep beneath the surface of Earth's moon, in chambers that officially didn't exist, Dr. Marcus Webb stood before a sight that would have shattered the sanity of most galactic citizens. The Guardian hung suspended in a crystalline matrix, its form defying easy description. Neither fully mechanical nor entirely organic, it represented technology that bridged the gap between the possible and the impossible. Status report, Admiral Chan's voice echoed through the secure communication link from the approaching human fleet. The Guardian is fully integrated with our defense network, DR. Webb replied, his voice carrying the exhaustion of 18 months of sleepless preparation. All construction phases are complete. The weapon systems are online and ready for deployment. The Guardian had been humanity's greatest secret since the day they discovered it buried beneath the Antarctic ice. Carbon dating had proven impossible because the materials didn't exist in any terrestrial database. Radioactive decay patterns suggested an age that made mockery of human civilization, but the technology was still functional. Still active. Still waiting. And the other sites? Admiral Chen asked. Fully operational. London, Beijing, Moscow, New York, Sydney. Every major population center is protected by Guardian-derived technology. If the fleet engagement fails, Earth can defend itself independently. The truth about humanity's rapid technological advancement wasn't that they were naturally innovative. It was that they had been learning from a teacher that predated their species by millions of years. The Guardian had been slowly, carefully guiding human development since the day they proved worthy of its attention. Dr. Webb remembered that day with perfect clarity. The research team had been investigating unusual electromagnetic signatures in the Antarctic when they found the chamber. Ancient. Vast. Clearly artificial. At its center, the Guardian waited in what they initially assumed was some kind of stasis. They had been wrong. "You have found me," the Guardian had said, its voice resonating directly in their minds without benefit of air or electronics. "This is appropriate. The time of testing approaches." The subsequent conversation had rewritten everything humanity thought they knew about their place in the universe. "I am the final remnant of the ancients," the Guardian had explained. "My people achieved transcendence long before your species existed, but we left watchers behind to guard against the return of the Devourers." The Devourers, it explained, were not merely another hostile alien species. They were a force of nature. A civilization that had evolved beyond biological constraints to become something closer to a galactic plague. They moved from galaxy to galaxy, consuming everything capable of thought, growing stronger with each conquest. "They have attempted this galaxy before," the Guardian continued. 65 million years ago, they came seeking to harvest the earliest stirrings of intelligence. My people stopped them, but at great cost. Only I remained to stand guard. Dr. Webb had asked the obvious question, why us? Why humans? "Because," the Guardian replied, "you are the first species in this galaxy to demonstrate the characteristics necessary to inherit our technology. Innovation. Cooperation despite diversity. The ability to sacrifice for others rather than merely for yourselves." What followed was an education unlike anything in human experience. The Guardian didn't simply share technology, it taught humanity to understand the principles behind it. Faster-than-light travel, exotic materials, energy manipulation on scales that redefined what was possible. But, most importantly, it taught them about war. The Devourers return in cycles, the Guardian had explained during one of their teaching sessions. They wait for galaxies to reach sufficient technological development to be worth harvesting, then, they strike with overwhelming force. They have never been defeated by direct military action. "Then, how did your people stop them?" Dr. Webb had asked. "By becoming something they could not harvest. Something they could not understand. Something they feared." The Guardian's solution was elegant in its impossibility. The ancients had transcended physical existence, becoming beings of pure thought and energy. They could not be killed because they were no longer truly alive. They could not be harvested because they existed beyond the material reality the Devourers consumed. But transcendence came at a price. The ancients could no longer directly interact with the physical universe. They could guide, teach, and protect, but they could not fight. That responsibility fell to their inheritors. "You will not become as we became," the Guardian had told humanity. "Your path must be different. But, you will become something the Devourers have never encountered. Something that will stop them permanently." The plan was audacious beyond measure. Over 18 months, humanity had constructed a defense network that spanned the galaxy. Not merely ships and weapons, but a technological infrastructure that redefined space itself. Using principles learned from the Guardian, they had created weapons that operated outside normal physical laws. "Dr. Webb," Admiral Chen's voice carried new urgency. "Our scouts report the Devourer fleet has begun active scanning. They know we're here." "All systems are responding normally," Dr. Webb confirmed. "The network is stable and ready for activation." Through the secure link, he could hear the bridge activity aboard Admiral Chen's flagship. Orders being issued in calm, professional tones that betrayed no hint of the magnitude of what they were attempting. 15,000 human ships, carrying technology that technically shouldn't exist, preparing to engage an enemy that had consumed dozens of galaxies. "Guardian," Dr. Webb addressed the ancient entity directly. "Are we ready for this?" "As ready as any organic species can be," the Guardian replied. "But, remember, Dr. Webb. Victory is not measured by destruction of the enemy. It is measured by preservation of what matters. Your people understand this in ways mine never did." The observation touched on the fundamental difference between humanity and the ancients. The ancients had achieved perfection through elimination of weakness. Humans had achieved strength through acceptance of imperfection. They fought not for purity or transcendence, but for the right to continue being messy, contradictory, and gloriously human. Fleet engagement commencing in T-30 minutes, Admiral Chen reported. All civilian populations have been relocated to protected zones. If this fails, the planetary defense systems are humanity's last line of protection. Dr. Webb checked the status displays one final time. Every major human world was protected by technology that created localized distortions in spacetime itself. If the fleet engagement failed, the Devourers would find human civilization suddenly very difficult to reach. But the real surprise waited in the space between galaxies, where Admiral Chen's fleet was about to demonstrate that sometimes the best defense was an offense the enemy never saw coming. Guardian, Dr. Webb asked, "What do you think will happen?" "Something unprecedented," the Guardian replied. "The Devourers have never encountered a species that fights for others rather than for themselves. They have never faced an enemy that treats preservation of diversity as more important than individual survival. Your people's greatest weakness, from their perspective, will prove to be their undoing." On the tactical display, the two fleets were converging at relativistic speeds. 12 massive Devourer constructs, each one a testament to technology perfected across millions of years of galactic conquest. Against them, 15,000 human vessels that looked almost fragile by comparison. But appearances, as the galaxy was about to learn, could be profoundly deceiving. "All units, this is Admiral Chen," came the transmission across all human frequencies. "We are 65 million years overdue for this conversation. Today, we're going to explain to the Devourers why consuming this galaxy was a mistake." The first energy discharges lit up space between the galaxies like a new star being born. But these weren't conventional weapons engaging in conventional combat. The Devourers found themselves facing something they had never encountered in their eons of conquest, technology specifically designed to be impossible to harvest, defend, or counter using their established methods. Dr. Webb watched the tactical display with fascination and growing hope. The Guardian had been right. Humanity's chaotic, contradictory, impossibly diverse nature was proving to be their greatest strategic advantage. The Devourers had come expecting to face another standard galactic civilization. Instead, they were discovering that humans didn't fight like anyone else in the universe. "Guardian," Dr. Webb said quietly, "I think we're going to win this." "Not win, Dr. Webb," the Guardian corrected. "Triumph. There is a difference. Winning implies defeating an enemy. What your people are doing is demonstrating that some things cannot be consumed, cannot be harvested, cannot be destroyed. They are teaching the universe a lesson it has needed to learn for eons." On the display, human vessels moved in patterns that defied tactical logic but somehow achieved perfect coordination. They fought not as individual ships seeking individual survival, but as components of a single organism dedicated to protecting something larger than themselves. The Devourers, for the first time in their collective memory, were learning what it meant to be surprised. "Phase 2 commencing," Admiral Chen announced. "All units, prepare for the demonstration that will end this threat permanently." Dr. Webb held his breath. Phase 2 was the part of the plan that even the Guardian couldn't predict the outcome of. Humanity was about to attempt something that no organic species had ever achieved, the creation of a technological solution that would make their entire galaxy permanently indigestible to the Devourers. Initiating Galactic Defense Grid, Admiral Chen's voice carried across all frequencies. "All human worlds, confirm activation of anchor points." One by one, reports flooded in from every human-inhabited system. The massive constructs that the galaxy had assumed were weapons platforms revealed their true purpose. They weren't weapons. They were components of a single, galaxy-spanning machine designed to do something the Devourers had never encountered. "Grid activation successful," Dr. Webb reported. "All anchor points are online and stable. The network is ready for final phase implementation." What humanity was about to attempt would either save their galaxy or destroy it. There was no middle ground. But, as Dr. Webb watched the tactical display showing human ships fighting with impossible courage against overwhelming odds, he realized that this was exactly the kind of insane, desperate, gloriously human solution that might actually work. The Devourers were about to discover that some prey fought back in ways that transformed them into something far more dangerous than predators. Admiral Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of the Defiant as space itself began to change around them. The battle with the Devourers had raged for 6 hours, and humanity's fleet was holding its own through tactics that defied every known principle of warfare. Human ships fought not for victory, but to buy time for something far more audacious than mere military triumph. Final phase initiation in T-minus 60 seconds, reported her tactical officer. Around them, the bridge hummed with activity as crew members prepared to implement a plan that would either save their galaxy or fundamentally alter the nature of reality itself. The Devourers had proven every bit as formidable as the Guardians' warnings suggested. Their 12 massive constructs were technological marvels that treated space and time as malleable resources. Human weapons that should have been devastating barely scratched their hulls. But humanity hadn't come to this fight expecting conventional victory. All anchor points confirm ready status, Communications Officer Torres announced. The galactic grid is stable and awaiting final activation command. Admiral Chen studied the tactical display showing the positions of both fleets. The Devourers had initially been surprised by human resistance, but they were adapting with terrifying efficiency. Their return fire was beginning to take its toll on the human formation. Ships were being lost, brave crews sacrificing themselves to maintain the defensive perimeter that protected the grid activation sequence. Admiral, her science officer called out, "We're receiving reports from across the galaxy. Every major civilization is monitoring this engagement. They're demanding explanations for the energy readings they're detecting." "Let them monitor," Admiral Chan replied calmly. "They're about to witness something that will redefine their understanding of what's possible." The truth was that humanity had never intended to defeat the Devourers through force of arms. The enemy's technology was simply too advanced, their experience too vast. But the Guardian had taught them something the Devourers had never encountered, the principle of transformative defense. T-minus 30 seconds to grid activation, the tactical officer announced. Throughout human space, the massive constructs that other civilizations had assumed were weapons began to reveal their true nature. Each one was a node in a vast network designed to accomplish something unprecedented in galactic history. Using principles derived from the Guardians' ancient knowledge and human innovation, they were about to transform their entire galaxy into something the Devourers couldn't consume. "All units, this is Admiral Chen," she transmitted across all frequencies, knowing that every intelligent species in the galaxy was listening. "What you are about to witness is not a weapon. It is an act of preservation. We are implementing protocols that will ensure the survival of all galactic civilizations, regardless of their current political differences." The countdown reached 0. Reality hiccuped. The effect began at Earth and propagated outward at faster than light speeds, carried by the network of anchor points humanity had constructed across the galaxy. As the wave passed each system, space itself underwent a subtle but fundamental change. The laws of physics remained the same, but their application was altered in ways that would make the galaxy permanently indigestible to the Devourers. "Grid activation successful," the science officer reported with awe in his voice. "The transformation wave is propagating according to projections. Estimated time to complete galactic coverage, 14 minutes. Admiral Chan watched as the Devourer fleet suddenly found themselves in a universe that no longer followed the rules they had mastered across millions of years of conquest. Their weapons began firing erratically. Their perfect formation dissolved into confusion as their ships discovered that the space they were moving through was no longer quite the same space they had entered. "What's happening to them?" the tactical officer asked. "They're discovering that our galaxy has just become uninhabitable for their kind," Admiral Chen replied. "The network isn't designed to destroy them. It's designed to make them incompatible with our local spacetime." The transformation was elegant in its simplicity. Using technology that bridged the gap between science and something approaching magic, humanity had encoded specific parameters into the fabric of space itself. The Devourers, who had evolved to consume organized information and energy, suddenly found themselves in an environment where such consumption was no longer possible. "Admiral, we're receiving transmissions from the Devourer fleet," Communications Officer Torres reported. They're trying to communicate. Put it through." The voice that emerged from the speakers was unlike anything in human experience. It carried the weight of eons, the authority of countless conquests, and, for the first time, uncertainty. "Unknown entities," the voice resonated with harmonics that suggested vast intelligence. "Explain the nature of your modification to local spacetime parameters." Admiral Chan smiled grimly. "We've made our galaxy indigestible to your kind. Your feeding methods are no longer compatible with our local physics. This is impossible. No organic species possesses the knowledge necessary for such modifications. You're right, Admiral Chen admitted freely. We had help. Help from the last survivors of the people you tried to devour 65 million years ago. The silence that followed was pregnant with implications that rippled across space. The devourers had assumed the ancients were extinct. The revelation that survivors remained, and had successfully passed their knowledge to a new generation, represented a paradigm shift of cosmic proportions. The ancients achieved transcendence, the devourer voice finally responded. They removed themselves from the material universe. They cannot interfere. They don't need to interfere, Admiral Chen replied. They just needed to teach us to stand up for ourselves. And, for everyone else in this galaxy. Around the human fleet, the devourer constructs were beginning to show signs of serious distress. Their perfect geometric forms were developing irregularities as they found themselves unable to maintain coherence in space that was actively rejecting their presence. Admiral, the science officer called out, I'm reading massive energy discharges from their vessels. They're trying to reverse the transformation. Let them try, Admiral Chen replied confidently. The network is self-sustaining and distributed across the entire galaxy. They'd have to simultaneously destroy every anchor point to reverse the effect, and there are over 50,000 of them. The true genius of the human plan became apparent as reports flooded in from across the galaxy. Every major civilization was monitoring the transformation wave as it passed through their systems, and they were discovering that rather than being harmed, their worlds were being protected. The modification to spacetime specifically enhanced the survivability of diverse, chaotic, imperfect civilizations while making the galaxy toxic to entities that fed on organized energy and information. We're receiving communications from the Galactic Council, Torres reported. They're demanding explanations and threatening military action if we don't reverse the process immediately. Admiral Chen sighed. Even in the face of galactic salvation, politics remained predictably short-sighted. Inform the Council that the process is irreversible and that they'll thank us later when they realize they're now permanently safe from extragalactic threats. Admiral, the tactical officer interrupted urgently, the Devourer fleet is withdrawing to the galactic edge. They're just leaving. On the main display, the 12 massive constructs that had threatened to consume entire civilizations were turning away from the galaxy with what could only be described as haste. Their perfect formations had dissolved into what looked suspiciously like panicked retreat. Unknown entities, the Devourer transmission resumed, this galaxy is now marked as incompatible with our requirements. We will not return. See that you don't, Admiral Chen replied firmly. And, spread the word to your kind, this galaxy is under protection. Any future attempts at invasion will be met with similar modifications to local spacetime. The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in stunned silence as the reality of their success began to sink in. Humanity had not merely defeated an invasion, they had made their entire galaxy permanently immune to the kind of threat the Devourers represented. Admiral, the science officer called out with excitement, we're receiving reports from anchor points throughout the galaxy. The transformation is complete and stable. Every inhabited system is confirming enhanced protective parameters. Admiral Chen nodded with satisfaction. Signal all units to stand down from combat alert. Begin recovery operations for damaged vessels. And, someone open a channel to the Galactic Council. They're going to want a very detailed explanation. As the human fleet began the process of returning to normal operations, Admiral Chen reflected on the magnitude of what they had accomplished. In 18 months of secret preparation, humanity had transformed from a barely noticed newcomer to the guardians of galactic civilization. Commander, Torres called out, the Galactic Council is demanding immediate conference. They're threatening economic sanctions if we don't provide full technical data on what we've done. Tell them, Admiral Chen replied with amusement, that we'll be happy to discuss our new protective modifications at the next scheduled diplomatic meeting. After they apologize for threatening the people who just saved their civilizations. The irony was delicious. For years, the galactic powers had treated humanity as junior partners in need of guidance and control. Now they found themselves protected by technology they couldn't understand, implemented by a species they had consistently underestimated. What happens now? The tactical officer asked. Admiral Chen studied the tactical display showing the Devourer fleet disappearing into intergalactic space, defeated not through destruction but through innovation that transformed the very nature of the battlefield itself. Now we go home, she replied. We've got a galaxy full of very confused aliens who need to learn that sometimes the newest kids on the block know things the older kids don't. As the human fleet began its journey back to normal space, the galaxy settled into its new reality. Space itself had been subtly altered in ways that would protect diverse, chaotic civilizations while remaining hostile to predatory entities that sought to consume organized information. The Devourers had learned that some galaxies contained prey that transformed themselves into protectors. And the Galactic Council was about to discover that humanity's period of quiet observation was officially over. Earth had gone silent to prepare for the greatest threat in galactic history. Now that the threat was neutralized, the galaxy was about to discover what humans were really like when they had something to say. Admiral Chen smiled as she composed her first message to the Galactic Council since breaking communication silence. It was time for some very interesting diplomatic conversations about the new galactic order, where humanity held the keys to the defense systems that protected everyone. The age of human diplomacy was about to begin, and the galaxy would never be quite the same.